This is Mac OS Ken.
The most valuable company on the planet fires 100 people. Apple could crest $400 billion in revenue this year. And more OS betas to test. It is Thursday, the 29th of August, 2024. I'm Ken Ray, and this is news from Mac OS Ken. Brought to you by yours truly and sponsored by 1Password Extended Access Management, helping businesses like yours secure every sign-in for every app on every device. Learn more at onepassword.com/product/XAM. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/MacOSCan. If I'm being completely honest, I'm finding it difficult not to be disheartened today. It started before I looked into Apple News for today's show, but that really didn't help. According to a report from Bloomberg, Apple took the rare step of cutting about 100 jobs in its digital services group, part of a shift in priorities for the critical division, according to people with knowledge of the matter. On the same day, Counterpoint Research hit with a release saying Apple's revenues are expected to reach a record high in 2024, crossing the $400 billion mark. According to the firm, that will be driven in part by growth in services of 14% year-on-year. Meanwhile, Apple's own June quarter earnings release said the company's services revenue last quarter reached a new all-time high. That release says Apple posted quarterly revenue of $85.8 billion, up 5% year-over-year. Quarterly revenue of $85.8 billion, which probably makes the salary for 100 people who work mostly in Apple books look like a rounding error. And yet, Bloomberg says the company informed the affected employees, who worked across several different teams in Senior Vice President Eddie Q's services group on Tuesday, said the people who asked not to be identified because they don't want to get fired too. I'm sorry, because the move is not public. What did I say? Bloomberg says the layoffs included some engineering roles, and the biggest cuts were made to the team responsible for Apple Books and the Apple Bookstore. There were also layoffs in other services teams, including the one that runs Apple News. The good news, affected employees apparently have 60 days to grab a new gig inside Apple before being terminated, which I assume means losing their jobs. The piece points out that other stalwarts of Silicon Valley like Cisco and Intel have cut significantly more jobs this year. Trying to remember, though, which one of those vies regularly for most valuable company on the planet. I did mention my attitude, right? If you had issue with Apple services on Tuesday, you and 100 people who work in Apple services were not alone. A piece from 9to5Mac says 10 of the Cupertino company's services either had issues or outright outages on Tuesday. Suffering issues were Apple Photos, Find My, Game Center, iCloud Mail, iCloud.com, and iWork for iCloud. Apple News and Apple stocks were said to be slow or unavailable for some, while the Mac App Store and Apple Books saw outages. Hey, you know what's going to help that? Fewer people. I'm nearly done with those kinds of remarks, by the way. Issues or outages seem to have run for between half an hour and 2.5 hours, depending on the service in question. Shall we circle back to the amount of revenue Apple's expected to take in this year? I mentioned a press release from Counterpoint Research. That's the one that has Apple revenue crossing $400 billion this year, a record driven by growth in hardware of 3% and growth in services of 14%. Focusing first on hardware, Counterpoint says 2024 will see growth in several key hardware categories after a decline in 2023. The release says every one of Apple's key hardware segments are likely to drive growth, including iPhone, iPad, the Mac, Apple Watch, and AirPods. New hotness is seen as one reason for the hardware's growth. Add in the promise of Apple Intelligence being implemented across hardware segments, and you got a party. Switching to services, Counterpoint says those will continue to grow much faster than hardware. In fact, next year, revenue from services is likely to become larger than that for hardware, according to Counterpoint, iPhone not included. The firm expects Apple to monetize Apple Intelligence, though not in a huge way right away. The way Counterpoint sees it, Apple Intelligence could boost these services revenue by at least 10% to 15% in coming years. That'll depend on a couple of noted factors, including how Apple tries to monetize it and how long it takes for Apple Intelligence to go global. More news in a moment, but first a word from today's sponsor, 1Password Extended Access Management. Whether it's marking a path or laying out a process, people won't always work the way you want them to. They might get the job done, but they may also cut corners in the process. It's not about being lazy. It's about finding ways to work that are easier. Nothing wrong with that, unless it puts your business at risk. Using devices that haven't been vetted, running apps IT can't keep an eye on, maybe using an ID made for a contractor who knows how long ago. You don't want to stand over their shoulder, but those are the kind of things you need to know about. And 1Password Extended Access Management can help you keep an eye on it. It puts all those unmanaged devices, unknown applications, and rogue identities under your control, making sure every user credential is strong and protected, every device is known and healthy, and every app is visible. 1Password Extended Access Management solves the problems traditional identity and access management and mobile device management miss. It's security for the way people work today. It's available now to companies with Okta and Microsoft Entra, and in beta for Google Workspace customers. Check it out at onepassword.com/product/XAM. That's onepassword.com/product/XAM. Wednesday was another beta bonanza day. Mac Rumors ran a number of reports saying the 8th betas of iOS and iPadOS 18 were out to developers. They were accompanied by the 8th developer betas of macOS 15 Sequoia, tvOS 18, and visionOS 2. Of course, that's not the only line of betas Apple's running these days. Prepping for a slate of Apple Intelligence features, the Cupertino company's been seeding developer builds of some of the operating systems after those. And that continued midweek. Another piece from Mac Rumors had Apple releasing the 3rd developer betas of iOS 18.1, iPadOS 18.1, and macOS 15.1. Now, following a pattern into which it's fallen over the past several weeks, Wednesday's .0 developer betas were followed by new betas for public testers. 9to5Mac ran a piece Wednesday afternoon saying the 6th public betas of iOS 18, iPadOS 18, macOS Sequoia, and more were available to Apple's public testing community. One assumes the more includes tvOS 18 and watchOS 11. It's unclear why, but 9to5Mac says this round is likely to be the last round of public betas ahead of the Glow Time event on the 9th of September. That said, there's still time to get in on the testing action. Your journey begins at beta.apple.com. At another state doing the state IDs and Apple Wallet thing, 9to5Mac says Apple started rolling out support for the function/feature on Wednesday for Hawaii. Befitting a driver's license, it seems to have started with a few speed bumps. Early on Wednesday, the piece said some people trying to get with the program were met with the message, "Thank you for your interest in adding your driver's license to Wallet. Due to high volume, the service is currently busy." That was followed by an offer to notify the would-be participant once they were actually able to participate. Despite Apple's wording that there's no need to reach for your physical ID with your ID and Apple Wallet, that's really only kinda true. ID and Wallet is still only accepted at select businesses, select venues, and select TSA checkpoints. So far, states have said that the electronic version does not replace the physical, and that folks still need to carry government-issue physical licenses and ID cards. Support for ID and Wallet is already available in Arizona, Colorado, Georgia, Maryland, and Ohio. The service is said to be coming soon for California. Interesting app news this week from outside Apple. Earlier this week, 9 to 5 Mac ran a piece about a new CarPlay app from Target. The app will let drivers find a nearby Target. Where I live, throw a rock and you'll hit one, so that's not really terribly compelling. The headlining feature, according to the report, is tied to drive-up orders. According to 9 to 5 Mac, you can use Target's CarPlay app to indicate when you're on your way to the store and have arrived. Can it scan your barcode without going in, though? Yeah, I go to Target quite a bit. There's nothing like striking while the iron is hot, and this is nothing like striking while the iron is hot. Seriously, I didn't even realize Snapchat was still a thing, and yet Mac Rumors ran a piece earlier this week saying the company has finally built a dedicated app for iPad. iPad came out in 2010. Snapchat came out in 2011. So, they've taken their time. Before this week's update, Mac Rumor says iPad users who wanted to use Snapchat had to run the iPhone version of the app, which was not optimized for the larger display, leaving it to run at a lower resolution with large surrounding black borders like other unoptimized apps. While it still only runs in portrait mode, this does sound like a better experience. Announcing the update, the company said Snapchat now offers native support for iPad. This means that Snapchat will fill an iPad's full screen, providing you with a larger canvas when capturing snaps and allowing you to see more friends on the second and fourth tabs. Snapchat is a free app. The updated version is ready now for devices running iOS 13 and iPadOS 13 or later. And finally today, something new to watch for about 20 of you. Mac Rumors says Elevated, the immersive video series for Apple Vision Pro, is set to hit the headset 1 week from tomorrow, Friday, the 6th of September. Describing the offering, Apple says, gain an all-new perspective as you take aerial tours of the world's most remarkable landscapes, led by well-known guides with a special connection to each place. Next week's episode 1 floats above Hawaii. A second episode, high above New England in autumn, will be along sometime. macOS Ken, brought to you by me, and sponsored by 1Password Extended Access Management. Learn more at onepassword.com/product/XAM. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/macosken. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media. Online at backbeatmedia.com. You can reach me a couple of ways. info@macosken.com or call 716-780-4080. Until next time, that is news from macOS Ken. I'm Ken Ray.
Ciao.